Okay, I want to talk about this book, whether it's this big book that contains all 10 books in one or the individual books. The Chronicles of Amber by Roger Zelazny, in my opinion, and I have not read a ton of books, but based on the little that I've heard and the little that I've read, this is clearly my favorite fantasy series of all fantasy books ever written. I think it's the best fantasy book ever written. I think it's better than The Lord of the Rings. Obviously, not everybody agrees, and that's fine. And I have not read a ton of fantasy series, so maybe there's a better series. Other than Lord of the Rings, what would you say is better than this series? Someone said that The Chronicles of Amber is science fiction disguised as fantasy. Can somebody explain that one to me? How is this science fiction? I only see fantasy. I don't see any science fiction in this. Supposedly Lord of Light or This Immortal is sci-fi. I have not read those yet. I want to. I first read The Chronicles of Amber back around somewhere in the 80s and loved it. Just loved it. And had really forgotten a lot of what's in here. And I'm just finished reading and listening to book 4. So I've still got book 5 to go. I've read the other 5, books 6 through 10. That is a very good series, a lot of fun to read, not as good as the first 5 books. It is separate, for those of you who don't know. You don't need to read books 6 through 10. It's like 2 different series. Same concept of a story. It's like the continuing of the story, but it's you don't have to read them. It's not necessary. But I think you probably should once you've read these 5. But this is a very cool volume. I got this at Barnes and Noble. It's all 10 books in one volume. The thing about this book, though, now I don't know about the individual books. The copy I had in the 80s was from the Science Fiction Book Club. So I had my 2 books, The Chronicles of Amber. The first one contained books 1 to 3, and then 4 and 5, or 1 and 2, and books 3 to 5, however it was. One was bigger than the other one. And that's my only, I only read it one time. So I didn't have a lot of memory. I can't believe how much I'd forgotten about this. I remembered stuff from the first book and some from The Guns of Avalon, which, by the way, The Guns of Avalon was much better than I thought it was. In my memory, I thought it was more of a boring book compared to the other 4, and I couldn't have been more wrong. I was like, wow, The Guns of Avalon is incredible. Where's this boring stuff that I remember? And I think what it is that at times Roger would get lost in his words. And I think the reason for that is that they were shadow walking. And in shadow walking, he's basically writing a different style. And at times, I think, I'm just going on memory here, it tended to bore me at times. Reading it now, it didn't bore me, but he did kind of get lost in words at times, I felt. And again, I think this is the greatest fantasy series ever written. So when I say that, I'm not really criticizing him. I think I understand why he wrote the way he did at times. Whereas Tolkien in The Lord of the Rings did bore me at times, because Tolkien is what's called a philologist. I forget what that means, like a wordsmith. And he really uses way more words than I feel are necessary. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Some people say The Lord of the Rings is for adults, The Hobbit is for children. Then I must be a child, because I'll take The Hobbit over to Lord of the Rings any day. It's much easier to read. Yes, it's easier to read. It's not as complex as The Lord of the Rings. But Zelazny is tricky to follow too at times. He has got some real complex stuff going on in this book series. But if you are a fan of fantasy and you have not read The Chronicles of Amber, you are missing out. Tell me what I'm missing out on. By all means, feel free. This Immortal, Lord of Light, I assume those are 2 must-reads for me. I've read Things that I've really enjoyed. I did enjoy Lord of the Rings. I've read it once, and I don't think I'll ever go through it again. It's just too difficult of a read. It's too heavy. I really enjoyed The Sword of Shannara, or is it Shannara? But that's the only one I read. I didn't read any of the other books that followed, the Elfstones and the Scions, or whatever they call them. But I really like Terry Brooks' writing, even though The Sword of Shannara, whether you know this or not, is just Lord of the Rings with a sword. It was very much plagiarism, but I still enjoyed it. I still love the book. But then he wrote this series called Magic Kingdom for Sale Sold, which I absolutely adore and loved. And yet I was reading reviews of it, and some people said it was pure garbage. And it was just terrible writing. I'm like, what the heck are you talking about? Oh, it must be too simplistic for you. It must be for children, right? Children like it. And then these sophisticated men who were writing reviews online criticizing Terry Brooks' garbage, and I'm like, okay. But that's a series I've read. The Dark Sword Trilogy by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. Great fantasy book. Great fantasy series. This is better. Guardians of the Flame by Joel Rosenberg. I only read the first book. It's probably the most D&D book of all the stories, because it's literally about a group of people who play D&D and they become their characters. I mean, you can't get much more D&D than that. But I didn't read the other books, and I probably should. I think there was something else too, but I don't know. But that's for the most part, that's my level, the amount of stuff that I've read in my life. And I'm almost 62 years old now, so I'm not a big reader. But what I've been doing with this book is I've been reading it while listening to Roger Zelazny narrate it on YouTube. Now, I'll put the links to that narration. I'll put the link to book one, and then you can just go from there. If you listen to Roger read this while reading your copy, it's so good. The thing I found weird, though, is that in this book anyways, I would say at least 100 times a different word is used. It's not like a complete, it's not exactly the same. There are times when an entire sentence or two were not included. It's like, did something get added or cut? What's going on here? Now, it's his unabridged version. I don't think this is an abridged version. I would assume that it doesn't really say. But regardless, the other thing I found very odd about reading this book is there were a lot of times where sentences started with and or but or. And I'm looking at this going, was this edited properly, or did somebody not do a really good job? I really don't know. Maybe he intentionally did that. But it looked like poor editing to me at times. Not that it bothered me. I still enjoyed the book. I was just surprised to see poorly constructed sentences. That was odd. But maybe I'm wrong about that too. Feel free to correct me on anything I'm saying here. I do want to share with you all, the other reason I made this video is not just to show this book, because if you haven't seen it, this is very cool. Or I like the individual books. There's so many different covers to it. But to share with you some really cool quotes that as I started reading, all of a sudden I started writing down certain quotes that I would read, and I just wanted to share them with you. I think you'll find these quite interesting. I'm just going to read them over here. There's 6 quotes that I just, this is my kind of writer. When someone writes like this, I just love it. So this first one, he says, "Who are you?" I asked. And then the creature responds, "Strygaldwyr," I don't know how you pronounce the name. "Strygaldwyr is my name. Conjure with it, and I will eat your heart and liver." To which Corwin goes, "Conjure with it? I can't even pronounce it," I said, "and my cirrhosis would give you indigestion. Go away." And I'm like, this is how Corwin talks to this demonic, powerful creature. I'm loving the lighthearted banter with which Corwin talks to people. It's really hilarious. I can't even pronounce it, and my cirrhosis would give you indigestion. Okay, the next one is, "While I had often said that I wanted to die in bed, what I really meant was that in my old age, and this is Corwin talking, that in my old age, I wanted to be stepped on by an elephant while making love. And when I read that, I was like, wait, what did you just say? Like, did he really just write that? Is this Zelazny kind of breaking the fourth wall and kind of just being joking? I don't even know. But I thought that was hilarious. Then there's this one. If you remember Dara, in the story, I'm trying to remember now, I think Dara is 17 years old, which in a fantasy story is, not all that atypical. But she's young. So he says, the thing had been quite unpremeditated on my part. I had not even thought of her as a woman until she came into my arms and revised my thinking on the subject. Okay, Roger. Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Wow. Okay, a few more. I became convinced then that he was out of his mind. Not that that helped me any. With anybody else, an insane madness would cause the loss of some control in a fight. But Benedict had hammered out his reflexes over the centuries, and I seriously believed that the removal of his cerebral cortex would not have altered his movements from their state of perfection. To which I had visions of the Black Knight from the Monty Python movie. Your arm's off. No, it's not. It's just a flesh wound. And I'm like, the removal of his cerebral cortex would not have altered his movements from their state of perfection. I'm dying when I read that. All right, two more. The last one's long. This one. I have a peculiar feeling that I may never see you again. It is as if I were one of those minor characters in a melodrama who gets shuffled off stage without ever learning how things turn out. I can appreciate the feeling, I said. My own role sometimes makes me want to strangle the author. Yeah, that's breaking the fourth wall. And that is so hilarious. I just love the way Zelazny writes. And the fact is he only does this a little bit here and a little bit there. For the most part, he doesn't do this stuff, but he keeps interjecting these little things. Now, this one's a little longer. It's about Lorraine, and I think it's great. I replaced her rings, her bracelets, her combs before I closed the grave. And that was Lorraine. All that she had ever been or wanted to be had come to this. And that is the whole story of how we met and how we parted. Lorraine and I, in the land called Lorraine, I love that aspect, that it's the land called Lorraine, and it is like unto my life, I guess. For a prince of amber is part and party to all the rottenness that is in the world, which is why whenever I do speak of my conscience, something else with me must answer, ha! In the mirrors of the many judgments, my hands are the color of blood. I am a part of the evil that exists in the world and in shadow. I sometimes fancy myself an evil, which exists to oppose other evils. I destroy them when I find them. And on that great day of which prophets speak, is he getting biblical and speaking of our world? But in which they do not truly believe, on that day when the world is completely cleansed of evil, then I too will go down into darkness, swallowing curses. Perhaps even sooner than that, I now judge. But whatever. Until that time, I shall not wash my hands, nor let them hang useless. Is he referring to our world too, from the real world, or is this purely Corwin in his judgments of his fantasy world that he lives in, and it is not any, like, slightly breaking the fourth wall? I'm not really sure, but I just love that quote. I love the whole thing with the character Lorraine. I remembered Lorraine. That's how much of an impression she had on me. That's one of the things I remembered. I did not remember Dara. I had completely forgotten, like, who is this? I remembered, the princes, the sisters. I remember the shadow walking and, all that. and I remember the whole thing with the Guns of Avalon, what that involved, but I didn't fully remember it. So it was great to hear it again. But now I'm on book 5, and I started listening. I've listened to maybe 45 minutes of it. I haven't been reading, just listening to the narration. It's crazy. This is nuts. This is like, how did Roger get all of this sorted in his mind? First of all, you're dealing with 9 princes. So you've got 9 brothers, and you have 4 sisters, and the dad, but he's kind of like out of the picture, Oberon. And you've got multiple characters throughout the story, and it became so complex. I'm like, how is he going to keep this all together? And he does. And he fooled me, because at first he's hearing one version from one of the brothers as to what is going on, and it all looks like it makes sense, but it's not what's going on. And then he hears another version, and it's like, yeah, they would have different concepts and ideas of what's actually happening. And how he resolves it all, and the way book 4 ended, I almost fell off my chair. I've loved the endings of books 1, 2, 3, and 4. I've loved all of the ways in which he ends these books. It's such an amazing, it's not the right word. And I don't want to say, I want to say something other than cliffhanger. It's not really a cliffhanger. It's like the perfect end to that book that makes you want very badly to start reading the next book. You're like, okay, I've got to find out what happens next. And he's great at that. He's so good at how to end the book. So how are you going to end book 5? Because book 5, it ends. Book 6 doesn't continue it. I can't wait to see how The Courts of Chaos, that's the title of book 5, how that ends. I'm not sure how it's going to end. Please don't spoil it for me in the comments. I don't remember. It's weird. I don't remember. But I was really young when I read it, and it's been a long time. So I just wanted to come on here and make this video. If it doesn't get a lot of views, so be it. But if it does get a lot of views, great, because I've written my own fantasy novel, and I've mentioned this before in other videos. It's called Forestera's Fate. I'll be real quick. In my second book, I've narrated both books on my channel. You can listen to the narration. I use music as intro and outro music. I use background music. In my second book, I bring Amber into my story. Risky thing to do. Don't know if that's gonna be an issue with anybody. I don't know if you'll love it, hate it, or somewhere in the middle. I don't know. But I would love to hear your thoughts on it. If you go to the playlist and just scan the chapter titles, just look at the chapter titles, and you'll see that I even use this as one of the thumbnails, the picture of this book. I wanted to make it real clear and obvious. But I love what I did. I thoroughly enjoy listening to it myself. I think it's very clever. You might think I'm an idiot. I don't know. It's perfectly fine. I like it. That's all that matters to me. I hope people like it. I hope it's not an issue. I would like to think that Roger likes what I did, assuming that he's consciously aware in some reality that we don't know about, and approves. I don't know. I certainly admire this man. So sad that he passed away when he did, because he'd be in his 80s today, and wouldn't it be wonderful to hear what he has to say today? It would be a great thing. Gary Gygax also, with the creator of D&D, who I also hope enjoyed what I've written, because it really was. Well, I won't wax eloquent anymore. We'll leave it at that. I hope you do read this book if you haven't. I hope you at least give a listen to my book. They're both in playlists. You can easily access them and listen to them at your leisure. They are available if you want to buy them, but you can also read them on my blog for free. You don't even have to buy the book. So that's all I wanted to say. Is this the greatest fantasy fiction book series of all time, or is there something that I would like even better than this? Don't say Lord of the Rings. I love Lord of the Rings. Great fantasy series. This is better, in my opinion. I don't think a lot of people will agree with me on that. I don't care. It's just an opinion. All right. Hope you all have a nice day, and we'll talk to y'all later. Bye-bye.